Tonight, with the State Assembly just passing a bill that would install a state monitor at the controversial East Ramapo School District, we talked to the lawmaker who co-sponsored the bill, and we'll ask him where it all goes from here. Then we'll bring in our panel and we'll debate the issue. And only a few days left in the session, and Albany lawmakers still have a whole lot on their plates. Little kids are sitting at the big table now because corruption indictments have gutted leadership, and it's making things even more difficult. Then, has the country become too PC? Well, Jerry Seinfeld, for one, says it has. We'll debate whether or not he's right or wrong. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. This evening, we're going to talk a whole lot about the state of New York, and later on in the program, we'll look at crunch time in Albany and how lawmakers only have a few days left in the session, but a whole lot of issues still left unsettled. But we will start in East Ramapo in Rockland County and to the contentious state monitor that just passed the bill, at least in the Assembly, but where it goes from here, your guess is as good as mine. Now, the bill, it would empower the state to appoint a monitor to oversee the East Ramapo School Board and to develop a 5-year improvement plan for the district. A sharply critical state report recommended that monitor, and the state official behind the report also bluntly said the following, quote, "The board appears to favor the interests of private schools over public schools." And the board he's talking about is controlled by Hasidic Jews who spend their kids to private yeshivas. Now, it's been accused of funneling money from the public schools to the yeshivas, particularly to pay for things like transportation and special education. Well, earlier today, I spoke to someone, Ken Zabrowski, who's a Democrat who co-sponsored this bill. We've talked seemingly on, if not on a daily, on a weekly basis for this. I can't agree with you more about not only the need for it, and I believe this thing's overdue. But I saw an interesting quote from a colleague of yours. I'm not surprised that the vote was, well, it wasn't a nail-biter, it was closer than I thought. Mm-hmm. And we'll get to the at least some of the arguments against this in a second, but this came from your colleague Matt Titone, who's a Democrat from Staten Island, who voted for it, but he talked about the conflict he had, and I think you can probably articulate that a lot of folks may have shared this. "I don't appreciate," he said, "the possibility that if I vote yes, I may be called an anti-Semite. If I vote no, I'm a racist. Certainly, this is a local issue, and I'm concerned, like many of you who are voting no, about the proverbial slippery slope of what will happen next. But still, there's something in my gut. I know it when I see it. Something has to be done immediately, or at the end of the day, not the Jewish community, not the black community, but for the children of East Ramapo." Were there a lot of conflicted colleagues of yours about which way at the end of the day to vote here?
I think there were, and my colleague from Staten Island, I think, really hit the nail on the head in terms of that conflict. But at the end of the day, this is about the children, and whatever sort of groups are involved in this, that shouldn't be the #1 priority. You know, when the rights of kids are being violated, it shouldn't matter who's doing the violating. And I don't care what religion, what group, what anything the board is. At the end of the day, we've gone through years, if not a decade, of conflict here in this district. We've had comptroller reports, we had an independent report from the Board of Regents, and all of them came to basically the same conclusion, that there's wrongs going on in this district, kids' rights are being denied, and we need some sort of oversight. And that's why we put forth the bill.
Like I said off the top, so I'm not phony, I'm 100% in agreement with this, but I'm going to play devil's advocate, and here are some of the most consistent arguments on the other side. How about if this happened in your district, and school board, duly elected by the community, all of a sudden, Big Brother swoops in here and they're going to tell them how they should run their district. How would you feel in that same situation?
Well, I would say, why is Big Brother swooping in? Is it just because on a whim? No. The state is stepping in because, A, the Board of Regents hired an independent person to go into the district, do a report, who came out with exactly this recommendation, that there be oversight. Talked about the public school population, one, not having access to its government, and two, having their opportunities, their programs systematically reduced. Talk about the comptroller coming in and doing audits and saying that there were procurement practices that were illegal. Talking about the sales of schools that were done inappropriately and state education department having to come in. These are all things that paint a picture of conflict, of strife, of crisis, a district in crisis that made us have to act here. This isn't something that tomorrow is just going to swoop in and take over a random school district because the government wants to. We don't want this conflict. We want to provide the kids the education they deserve.
In your district, you have a healthy Jewish population. Has anybody called your office and said, Assemblyman, you're an anti-Semite because of the bill you sponsored and the way you voted?
Well, I don't know that I've had anyone personally say it to me, but I've certainly had the emails and the Facebook messages and the tweets that go along with this type of thing. And but I'm confident. We've had a host of supporters from all different religions. The Rockland clergy were up there, priests, rabbis, imams. We've had the American Jewish Committee sign off on this piece of legislation, the Anti-Defamation League. These groups don't support legislation that is anti-Semitic or anti-anybody. These groups recognize the conflict there and know that this is a reasonable way to bring the community together.
Were a lot of the no votes yesterday, was it more out of political concern that if they voted yes for it, they were concerned how they'd be branded? Also, this community votes as a block right now. There could be some political consequences.
There were a host of reasons for the no votes. It's tough for me to sort of succinctly state why some of my colleagues voted no, but some of the things I heard certainly had to deal with that. You know, some fear of anti-Semitism, but I tried to talk about what we're trying to do there, talk about the groups that have supported it. Some people talk about the precedent that we're setting, and I would say to those people that New York has gone into municipalities many times. We have control boards over counties. Yep. In 2002, in the Roosevelt School District, New York did something much more drastic, removing board members, canceling elections and phasing them back in. I believe the state took over the budget process as well. That's not what we're doing here. And ironically, many of my colleagues that voted no yesterday and talked about the precedent voted yes in 2002. It passed the House unanimously. So I think this was a measured approach. In terms of a precedent, I think this is a better precedent that we set yesterday than we set in 2002. Keeps the board involved. Hopefully brings the community together, brings a monitor, but it's not a full state takeover. So it's tough for me to say why someone voted no, but I'm thankful for my colleagues that stood up for the kids at the end of the day, and we had a majority.
So the 64,000 or whatever the right number is nowadays to ask, what does the Senate do?
So right now, the Assembly's passed it, the governor said he supports it, and the Senate's out there on an island. I hope they understand what the kids of East Ramapo need, and then they pass the bill.
All right, so you heard from the lawmaker who sponsored this legislation, and now it goes to the state Senate. But when we come back on the other side of the break, we're going to bring in our panel. We'll debate whether or not this is good legislation, or whether you like it or not, a school district duly elected should be able to make up their own mind where the taxpayer dollars go.